are going crazy for you, and I know that the people have been watching you, your audition, and people love you. It's amazing.
Roland Abante was just a man who spent his days hauling fish in a small boat under the scorching Filipino sun. But suddenly, he steps onto one of the biggest stages in the world. But behind that humble smile and that powerhouse voice is a story of heartbreak. And here's the shocking part. America's Got Talent barely scratched the surface. There are things that happened before and after that performance that will absolutely blow your mind. What are the mysterious things AGT didn't tell us about Roland Abante? Well, sit tight, because we're about to unpack it all. Come along, from Cebu to the world. Roland Abante's path to global recognition didn't start under bright stage lights or in front of cheering crowds. No, it began in the quiet coastal town of Santander, tucked away at the southern tip of Cebu province in the Philippines, a place so small some maps might even miss it. That's where Roland's story began, far from the glitz and glamour of America's Got Talent, and closer to the sea breeze, humble shanties, and the rhythm of waves crashing against bancas, those small wooden fishing boats you often see bobbing in the ocean. People who knew him back then would probably never have imagined he'd one day be watched by millions. But isn't that the thing about dreams? They don't care where you come from. In his early years, Roland was simply one of many kids growing up in a tight-knit household. He was the youngest of 7, which meant, like many last-born children, he learned to speak up early and listen even earlier. His parents, though not rich by any measure, were rich in wisdom and grit. They didn't have fancy jobs or plush furniture, but what they gave their children was something money couldn't buy: discipline, the value of work, and a kind of quiet resilience that settles deep in your bones when life isn't always easy. In a town where the ocean fed you and family meant everything, Roland's foundation was laid brick by brick through everyday struggles and small victories. Roland Abante shocked everyone with his voice. But what if we told you there's so much more to his story than what you saw on TV? Behind those powerful performances is a journey full of struggles, sacrifices, and a few surprising twists America's Got Talent never mentioned. So what was left out, and why? Stick around, because once you hear what really happened before and after the stage lights went out, you'll never see him the same way again. He learned how to swim before he could tie his shoes. That's not an exaggeration. It was simply part of growing up by the sea. The ocean wasn't just a body of water to him, it was a livelihood, a playground, and a teacher. His childhood home was as modest as they come: bamboo walls, nipa palm roofing, and a floor that creaked with every step. It didn't have much, but it held love, laughter, and the occasional karaoke night that could be heard 3 doors down. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the seed of music was quietly planted in Roland's heart. As he got older, the weight of responsibility came knocking, as it always does. Roland didn't shy away. Instead, he leaned into it. He became a fisherman, rising before dawn, heading out with nets and hopes for a good catch. Every morning was a gamble, a test of patience and endurance. He wasn't just fishing for food. He was fishing for a better future. On top of that, he also worked as a habal driver, zigzagging through narrow dirt roads and taking locals from one point to another on his motorbike. It was hard work, long hours, but quitting? That was never an option. He had people counting on him. And let's be honest, how many of us would still sing after such exhausting days? But Roland did, because for him, music was more than sound. It was an escape. Music in Roland's life didn't start in a studio, it started on the streets. in the echo of karaoke machines, and inside the walls of a small church. If you've ever been to a Filipino neighborhood, you know karaoke is not just entertainment, it's therapy, competition, and a way of life. Roland would often grab the mic, not out of ambition, but out of joy. Little did he know those carefree karaoke sessions were polishing something much bigger. His voice, raw, rich, and full of emotion, began turning heads. Not in fancy concert halls, but in crowded sari-sari stores, family gatherings, and town fiestas. And then there was the church choir. Every Sunday morning, dressed in simple clothes, Roland would sing hymns that floated through stained glass windows and touched hearts in wooden pews. His early shyness meant he often blended into the group, but there came a time when people started to turn and say, "Who is that singing?" Slowly, his confidence grew. He began to believe in the voice that others already admired. He entered local singing contests. He didn't always win, but when he did, the prize money, even if it was just a sack of rice or a few hundred pesos, meant a lot. Not just because of the reward, but because of the validation. Was it possible, he started to wonder, that this was more than just a hobby? But even then, Roland never imagined stepping onto a global stage. Who would, right? When your daily life involves hauling fish at sunrise and ferrying passengers by motorbike in the afternoon, chasing dreams feels like a luxury. His goals were simple: provide for the family, stay grounded, and keep singing whenever he could. Fame wasn't the goal. Feeding his loved ones was. And maybe that's why his story resonates with so many, because he never chased the spotlight. The spotlight came looking for him. So when Roland Abante eventually walked onto the stage of America's Got Talent, many viewers only saw the polished performance, the strong vocals, the emotional delivery. But what they didn't see, what most shows never tell you, is the journey behind that moment. The years of struggle, the small wins that felt like big triumphs. The man who once sang to his town with a microphone plugged into a battered karaoke machine, now singing to the world with all his heart. And that's the beauty of Roland's story. It reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary talents come from the most ordinary beginnings. Isn't it something how life can surprise us like that? One day, you're a fisherman singing to the sea, and the next, you're astonished. The viral moment that changed everything. Long before Roland Abante ever dreamed of standing beneath the dazzling lights of America's Got Talent, his voice was already quietly moving people, one note at a time. And he didn't need a grand stage or fancy microphone to do it. All it took was a single video. Just one video. Can you imagine? One moment you're singing from your heart, probably not thinking much of it, and the next, the whole world is listening. That was Roland's reality back in 2014, when someone recorded him singing To Love Somebody. Not just singing, but pouring his soul into every single word of Michael Bolton's version of that Bee Gees classic. It wasn't planned. It wasn't staged. There were no flashing lights or studio edits. It was just Roland, his voice, and pure emotion. And somehow, that simple combination struck a nerve with millions. The video didn't just make the rounds on a few Facebook pages, it exploded. People from across the globe shared it, commented on it, cried over it. Before long, it had racked up over 7 million views on YouTube alone. People were asking, who is this man? Where has this voice been hiding? And while his performance seemed effortless, the journey that led to that moment was anything but easy. Roland wasn't some trained singer with an agent or a record deal. He was a humble karaoke singer from the Philippines, singing his heart out whenever and wherever he could. That's the part that makes this story so compelling, isn't it? He wasn't chasing fame, he was simply sharing what he loved. But fame, it seems, had already begun chasing him. As the video went viral, the noise surrounding his name got louder. His own community back home was overjoyed. They rallied behind him, shared his video with pride, and cheered him on like he was family. Because to them, he was. His talent wasn't just a source of entertainment, it was a symbol of hope. And word spread fast. So fast that talk show host Ellen DeGeneres reportedly extended an invitation to feature him on her show. Think about that. 1 minute you're singing in your neighborhood, the next, Hollywood is knocking. It was surreal. Before long, Roland was invited to perform on ASAP, a major variety show in the Philippines, where he sang alongside Arnold Pineda, the lead singer of Journey. That was no small feat. To be given a platform alongside such names meant the world was starting to see what his hometown already knew. This man was special. But behind the viral success and media buzz, Roland was quietly battling doubt. You know that little voice that tells you you're not good enough? That creeps in even when the world is screaming your name? Roland knew that voice all too well. Even as opportunities began lining up, the thought of auditioning for America's Got Talent stirred something deep and uncomfortable in him. He called it his big dream, but even just thinking about it made him emotional. In interviews, he confessed how torn he was, grateful but scared, excited yet overwhelmed. After all, who was he to dream so big? That's where his family came in. His wife and son were his constant reminders that he could do this. Every day they spoke with him, encouraged him, lifted him up when he felt shaky. Roland once said that being an entertainer is especially difficult when you're far from home and the people who ground you. But in his case, it was their voices, their faith in him, that became the fuel behind his courage. His wife believed in his talent with her whole heart, and his son looked at him like a hero already. What stronger motivation could anyone ask for? When he doubted himself, they reminded him of what he was capable of. When he hesitated, they pushed him gently forward. So when Roland finally stepped onto that AGT stage, it wasn't just his dream unfolding, it was the dream of every person who ever rooted for him. Every viewer who had hit share on his viral video. Every family member who stayed up late just to remind him that he was good enough. It's easy to look at viral stars and see just the moment of fame. But behind that moment, there's almost always a story of quiet struggle, unexpected kindness, and unshakable love. Roland's journey was proof of that. And perhaps the real magic wasn't just in his voice, but in the way his story reminded us that sometimes talent doesn't need a spotlight to shine. Sometimes it just needs a chance and a little push from the people who believe in us when we're too afraid to believe in ourselves. Because let's face it, not every star shines under a spotlight. Some glow quietly in the background until someone kind enough, brave enough, or just crazy enough gives them a shot. A shot to be seen, to be heard, to be believed in. And when that moment finally came for him, it wasn't just a performance. It was a lifetime exploding into a single chance. Now, hold tight and don't go anywhere. Because what happened behind the scenes of America's Got Talent? Before the lights, before the applause, before the world knew his name, might just change the way you see everything that came after. Behind the scenes of America's Got Talent. When Roland Abante first stepped onto American soil, it was as if he had landed on a completely different planet. Everything around him, The lights, the people, the towering buildings, the sound of unfamiliar sirens, the constant rush, was a far cry from the quiet fishing village in Cebu he had always known. And while millions of viewers watched him on America's Got Talent for just a few minutes, what they didn't see was the emotional, physical, and mental journey that unfolded behind the scenes. You see, for Roland, this was more than just a singing competition. It was the first time he had ever set foot outside his country. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? One day, you are casting nets into the ocean, and the next, you're flying across the Pacific Ocean with a dream and a suitcase full of nerves. According to those close to the production, Roland had never even held a passport before this. So, everything. The long-haul flight, navigating airport security in a language he wasn't entirely comfortable with, figuring out which terminal to go to, even the feel of an escalator beneath his feet, was new. Los Angeles, with its traffic, massive buildings, and fast-talking people, must have felt like a movie set he'd accidentally walked onto. The hotel room alone, complete with fluffy pillows, a minibar, and a strange-looking telephone, was something he had only seen in films. But even with all the culture shock, Roland carried himself with quiet strength. He was in awe, but he wasn't overwhelmed. He knew why he was there. Now, here's the part viewers didn't see on their screens. Roland didn't speak much English. Sure, he understood bits and pieces thanks to school back home, but he wasn't confident enough to fully express himself. So throughout his time on AGT, he depended heavily on a translator, not just for the audition, but also during rehearsals, backstage conversations, and interactions with the judges and crew. But the magic of Roland's performances was that none of that mattered. The moment he opened his mouth to sing, the words, whether in English or not, carried emotions that needed no translation. His voice became his language. And in those moments, didn't it feel like everyone in the room understood him perfectly? Still, getting to that stage wasn't easy. Behind every soul-stirring note was hours of practice. The cameras never showed the nights he spent going over his song, trying to perfect the tone, the pitch, the phrasing. Production insiders mentioned how meticulous he was, constantly rehearsing, checking in with his vocal coach, even asking the translator to help him understand the judges' feedback from previous acts. Despite his calm stage presence, Roland wrestled with self-doubt. Would Americans like his voice? Would he connect with people who didn't speak his native tongue? Those questions weighed on him, and yet he never backed down. He took that nervous energy and turned it into fuel. Just moments before he walked onto the AGT stage, he would often find a quiet corner backstage, close his eyes, and take deep breaths. No pep talks, no pacing, just silence. Maybe he was picturing his family back home. Maybe he was thinking about the people in his village who believed in him. Whatever it was, by the time he stood in front of the judges, the shy fisherman from Cebu became someone else entirely. A man who sang not just with his voice, but with his heart. And when the judges responded with glowing praise, his surprise was genuine. Roland wasn't someone used to being in the spotlight. He didn't come from a place where applause was common. So when Heidi Klum stood up and hugged him, and Simon Cowell followed suit, two global stars reaching out to embrace a simple man from the Philippines, it hit him hard. He later confided to a crew member that those hugs weren't just about the performance. They felt like a message, like the world was saying, "We see you, we hear you, you matter." For Roland, those few seconds of physical warmth held decades of emotional meaning. After all, How often does someone from a humble background get embraced by people they've only ever seen on TV? It wasn't just validation of his talent, it was validation of his entire life journey. A reminder that despite the miles, the differences, the fears, and the barriers, dreams can stretch beyond borders. And as Roland returned to his hotel that night, quietly holding on to the memory of that moment, one thing had changed forever. He no longer felt small. Because for the first time in his life, the world had looked his way and smiled. The world no longer felt like this giant, untouchable stage. And he no longer felt like a background character in his own story. Because for the first time in his entire life, the spotlight didn't just find him, it embraced him. But what happened next? What do you do when the applause fades, the cameras stop rolling, and the hotel room gets quiet again? What does life look like when you're no longer on the stage, but forever changed by it? Well, buckle up, because Roland's life after AGT is a whole new chapter you'll definitely want to see through till the very end. Life after AGT. After his emotional performances and tearful goodbye on America's Got Talent, Roland Abante returned home not as someone who had lost, but as someone who had found something much deeper: his voice, his people, and his calling. Who would have thought that a simple man from the Philippines, known more for fishing than for fame, would stir the hearts of millions across oceans? It almost sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? But for Roland, it became his new reality. When the bright lights of AGT dimmed, many assumed he'd quietly slip back into the background, back to the shores and steering wheels he once called home. But instead of retreating, he surged forward. According to those close to him, Roland had no plans of letting his moment fade into a mere memory. Word quickly spread that he was planning something big, something musical, something spiritual, and something that would take him across borders and into the hearts of people who had never even heard of Buno before. His first major step? A concert tour. Not just around his hometown or neighboring cities, but across the United States and Canada. Now, imagine this. Just months after waving goodbye to the AGT stage, he found himself center stage again, this time in Woodridge, Virginia, at the Pine Kitchen, where the room overflowed with Filipino-American fans, many wiping tears as they listened to the same voice that had once silenced a room of judges and captivated a country. Some in the crowd said they didn't even expect to cry. But when Roland sang, they couldn't help it. He was real, and his voice hit differently, not because of vocal acrobatics, but because of the soul behind every note. And it didn't stop there. In May 2025, his show in Chicago, held at Ayatian Restaurant, was promoted as a once-in-a-lifetime experience. People lined up for hours. Tickets were snapped up quickly. Why? Because they knew what many others were just beginning to understand. Roland was not just a singer. He was a storyteller in song. The final stop of his tour in Tampa, Florida, was more than just a performance. It was a celebration. There, he didn't just sing. He spoke from the heart. In front of a crowd that had followed his journey from that very first televised audition to that very moment, he expressed deep gratitude. He thanked the producers, the fans, and even the critics, yes, even them, for pushing him to be better and to believe in his gift. But Roland's story doesn't end with music. Alongside the applause and encores, something else was quietly taking shape. Inspired by his deep faith and his desire to stay connected to his roots, Roland began developing a line of merchandise that wasn't just about selling t-shirts or mugs, it was about sharing a piece of himself. The brand, named Buno after his childhood nickname, became more than a label. It became a symbol. a symbol of humble beginnings, unwavering belief, and the fusion of culture and spirituality. His merchandise started small, just a few items available at concert venues. But as demand grew, especially among faith-driven communities and overseas Filipinos, Roland expanded. Friends say he pored over every design detail himself. Why? Because he didn't want to sell something just for the sake of it. He wanted people to wear or use his items and feel encouraged, uplifted, and reminded of who they are and what they believe in. From caps embroidered with Bible verses to shirts that carried Tagalog phrases of hope, his brand connected people in ways even he hadn't imagined. What makes Roland's story so touching isn't just the success. It's the unexpected nature of it all. Who would have thought a man who once battled rough waters with a net and drove long hours in silence would one day take on stages in foreign lands and have his name printed on merchandise, embraced by believers around the world? Life really does surprise us, doesn't it? And perhaps what resonates most is that Roland didn't change who he was to fit the mold of fame. He remained the same soft-spoken, humble man, now simply with a microphone in one hand and a message in the other. His journey proves something powerful: that you don't need to win the biggest prize to win hearts, and that sometimes what seems like the end of a competition is just the beginning of a purpose-driven mission. In the end, people aren't just following Roland for his music. They're following him for his courage, his faith, and the way he reminds us all that no dream is too far, no past too small, and no voice too quiet to echo across the world. And just when you think you've seen the full picture, Roland flips the page and shows us another side of him. So if you thought his singing was powerful, wait until you hear what he's planning to build next, right in the heart of Cebu. Stay right here, because this part, it'll leave you both inspired and speechless. Plans for a music foundation. In Cebu, Roland Abante's dreams have never really been just about himself. Sure, he rose to fame on one of the biggest stages in the world, but if you ask him today what truly matters, he'll likely say it's about the lives he can touch. Now that the spotlight is on him, isn't that what purpose often looks like? Using your platform to light someone else's path? Right now, back in his beloved home province of Cebu, Roland is quietly laying the foundation for something much bigger than any solo performance. He's working on establishing a music foundation that would open doors for underprivileged youth with musical talents, kids who, like him, may never have imagined that their voices could travel far beyond their neighborhood karaoke machines. He wants to build a place where talent doesn't need a passport or connections, just a melody and a heart full of hope. Could it be that the next global sensation is waiting barefoot in a dusty barangay, just like Roland once was? This vision isn't born out of obligation or even fame. It's rooted in memory, in the quiet pain of being overlooked, and the unexpected joy of finally being seen. Roland remembers all too well what it felt like to dream in silence, to hum songs on a fishing boat, wondering if the ocean was the only audience he'd ever have. And so, giving back isn't just a kind gesture for him. It's personal, it's necessary, and it's happening. But he's not stopping at building an institution. He's taking the time to go out, physically, to small towns across the Philippines, towns that don't get talent scouts or big auditions. Roland has started mentoring young singers there, spending time with them, listening to their voices, and even more importantly, their stories. And slowly, something incredible has begun to unfold. Young vocalists are looking at Roland and saying, "If he did it, maybe I can too." Can you imagine what it means to a child from a fishing village to suddenly believe that their voice matters? That's the real ripple effect of Roland's journey. What began as a personal dream has grown into a movement, quietly inspiring the next generation of dreamers. He's not just handing out advice, he's handing out belief. He's saying, in his own humble way, you don't have to be born into privilege to be heard. His story has become a mirror for so many who never thought they had a chance. And maybe that's the most powerful thing about Roland's evolution. He's become both the dream and the evidence. But his journey doesn't end with mentoring. Roland has also shifted his focus to something deeply intimate, telling his story through original music. He's begun writing songs that capture the gritty truth of his upbringing, the poverty he lived through, the heartbreaks he endured, the quiet prayers, the waiting, and the miracles he never saw coming. His new music is raw, unfiltered, and soaked in honesty. It doesn't aim to impress with gloss or glamour. Instead, it speaks to the soul of anyone who's ever felt invisible. Isn't that what real art does? Speak to the ache we don't always know how to describe? Through lyrics and melody, Roland is giving voice to the quiet parts of his past. And by doing so, he's letting others see that their struggles, too, can have meaning, that their pain can be turned into poetry, and that their lowest moments don't have to be the end of their story, they can be the start of something beautiful. Roland's music foundation, his mentorship, his storytelling, they all point in the same direction, toward a world where more people get the chance to be heard, just like he finally was. And so, when people talk about Roland Abante today, it's no longer just about that viral audition or his powerful vocals. It's about his heart, his legacy, and the many lives he's quietly changing. Because in the end, isn't that the greatest kind of success? The kind that echoes far beyond the stage? With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.